No Frith with fascists. Something you may have heard of, but what does it mean? Let's break it down. Frith. I've done a few videos on the subject, but the short definition is peace and community. A Frith bond is a connection you hold with your ingangard, inner yard, your kith and kin, the connection to those closest to you. Fascism. Fascism is a vague colloquial definition for a political ideology that formed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It's recognizable by faith in nationalism, authoritarian rule, strict adherence to hierarchy, and propaganda used to control the people. So, propaganda. Relevant to heathenry, specifically, we have theft and twisting of imagery and symbolism, particularly to stoke the fires of national pride. Which is why you get this odd mixture of Nordic symbolism and Christianity, as well as using fiction books like 1871's The Coming Race as somehow being proof of the master race. Actual fiction gives Ayn Rand vibes, to be honest. Socialism. Another falsehood used to push fascist rhetoric is using popular leftist terminology and symbolism to push agendas. Seriously, fascism will use anything and everything to get you on their side. This is why Anton Drexler, one of the founders of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, used popular socialist and communist terms and symbols. This is pre-Hitler, by the way, and one of the reasons the whole unalive baby Hitler time travel thing doesn't work. The ideology existed before him. Drexler simply did things like focus the attention to global bankers and other anti-Semitic language, rather than the bourgeois ruling class that actually owns everything and makes the rules. This is why fascism appeals to power. We're no longer focusing on the actual status quo, who's failed, extorted, and abused the working class. Now we're focusing on historically marginalized people. So millionaires, and today billionaires, love fascist rhetoric and secretly fund right-wing talking heads. They can focus the attention on the people who don't look like you, even though you and other working class people around you of all melanin levels and ethnic backgrounds have far more in common. You have capital L libertarians walking around blaming the poor, even though the term libertarian used to mean anarcho-communist. Horseshoe fallacy. This theft of leftist symbolism and rhetoric leads to what people call the horseshoe theory, assuming that going far enough left or right leads to similar, if not the same, place. Obviously, this is untrue. The far right simply appeals to those who want to control and subjugate in a strict hierarchy. The far left varies, but typically wants actual freedom above all. Freedom to be who you want, freedom to love who you want, and freedom to live unimpeded by power structure, free from force of will. We may not agree on how or what that looks like, but that's the goal. And if you're saying, but Grim, what about forcing us to pay for stuff? Or some such thing, this is what capital L libertarians don't get. Money creates hierarchy. If you have it, those that want it will do things for you. And if you don't have it, your desperation and need for survival means you're subject to the will and whim of the wealthy. Liberals. Despite what American media loves to tout, liberals are not on the left, not even close. They're center-right. Liberals are still trying to work within the system to change things, rather than looking at the system as the problem. Think about this. During the Industrial Revolution, we had anarchists, communists, and socialists literally dying for your rights. 8-hour workdays, weekends off, benefits, unions, none would exist without leftists fighting for your freedom. Even the VA exists because of protesters like Smedley Butler, who had to fight for veterans to have promised benefits. Neoliberalism is the philosophy of using capitalism and existing power structures. You may have heard this referred to as classical liberalism. Unfortunately, the systems of power in place are always subject to those in power. And make no mistake, the wealthy own the corporations and are running the government. They go to the same country clubs and collude on the same golf courses. Seriously, why do rich people love golf so much? I've worked at 2 different country clubs now. All I've seen is the first syllable. Liberals also have a tendency to seek a central peace with the violent fascists, as though a violent ideology is just a different perspective. Volkism. This all culminates into what's become folkism. The idea that one must have German/Nordic ancestry to be heathen. Of course, they never actually check. Technically, one could be of Jewish or African descent and have Nordic heritage, but if you do and try, they will kick you out of their spaces. They care more about white skin than anything. It comes from the aforementioned manipulation and propaganda of the Nazholes and misinterpretation of what a closed practice is. A closed practice requires initiation, not blood quantums. Heathenry doesn't require initiation, only interest and self-identification. You define your heathenry. We are our deeds, not our melanin content or our ethnic backgrounds.
You're not your job. You're not how much money you have in the bank. You're not the car you drive. You're not the contents of your wallet. You're not your fucking khakis.
Not your fucking khakis. So, how do we prevent this? Decolonize your mind. We all grow up within these toxic, abusive systems of power. We're raised using slurs and locker room talk, and in the US, Red Scare rhetoric was used to erode already existing labor rights, as well as create fear of leftist ideologies. It's important for everyone to do this, to understand how you both benefit and what detriments affect you in relation to the dominant cultural structures, also called hegemony. As a pagan, you now have one more thing distancing you from the accepted hegemonic hierarchy. We live in a society dominated by Christian overculture. Only by research, introspection, and listening to people outside of your demographic will you understand that and start to remove the facade that fascism and colonialism create. Coming from the perspective of a white man in America, I descend from colonizers and benefit from being on indigenous land, as well as being male, which offers privileges I'm not fully aware of unless I listen to women. But being working class, I know my time and labor is used and exploited by the wealthy, by those who benefit the most from stealing resources from indigenous peoples all over the world. It doesn't make any sense that Volkish try to remain part of the hegemony when, if the evangelical right had their way, they'd be persecuted same as any non-Protestant. Another thing we must do is educate. Educate each other, educate the layman, teach people that our symbols and our religions aren't racist or hate-filled. I've seen many creators call for not using certain symbols because they will make BIPOC people feel unsafe. My answer to this is twofold. One, what other factors about you look unsafe? Are you familiar with Volkish symbols and dog whistles to know what not to do? And don't be offended when BIPOC and other marginalized people keep their distance. We should make them feel welcome, but we can't and shouldn't force them out of comfort zones. And two, don't let the Volkish take our symbols. There's a lot of power in symbols and language, and other things they twist for their ideology. Not just spiritual power, but also cultural and societal. For example, if we stop using some or all of runes, the only source would be hate-affiliated. I've seen some so-called leftists attempt to say tarot is a Romani closed practice, but they assume this without ever speaking to a Romani person. This is actually liberal performance activism. It benefits no one. It's either helping the fascists claim our culture, or it's a good soundbite from an alt-right Crowder type looking to vilify the left. Finally, community. The purpose of this long tangent. Frith is one of the central values of heathenry. Building community, both amongst fellow heathens, as well as understanding the importance of Frith bonds with friends and family that aren't heathen. It's impossible to hold that bond with people whose values directly oppose your own and put people in harm's way, either directly through active violence or indirectly through passive legislation and gatekeeping of resources. Remember, we are social animals. Our earliest ancestors survived by being in cohesive groups. Even the supposed rugged individual, propagated through capitalist ideologies, must rely on others, whether that's a workforce they pay or people who they get tools and resources from. Community must support the individual for the individual to support the community. None of this is to say we shouldn't try to help Volkish be inclusive. You probably won't convince an old skinhead stuck in their ways, but younger Volkish, maybe. If you or somebody you know wants to get out, there are organizations like Life After Hate that can help get people out of those situations. No Frith with fascists doesn't mean we shouldn't help end the cycles of hate. It takes work to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. After all, we are some of our actions, not our words.
Scorn!